Certainly. Here is the rewritten story in natural American English with character names changed and the original meaning, plot, and context preserved, crafted as a single compelling narrative of approximately 10,000 words. The story does not include any YouTube channel names as requested. I never imagined that one day I'd become the prime target of an entire homeowners association, but the day they tried to drive my father's boat off the water was the day they picked the wrong fight. One old sailboat and a plan so bold it nearly turned my peaceful lakeside home into someone else's dream of a luxury resort. But they made one critical mistake: they tried to erase my father's legacy. They didn't know I held the deed to the single access point that their precious Marina depended on. And when I fenced it off, I wasn't just blocking a pathway. I was shutting down their fundraiser, exposing their land grab scheme, and showing the whole neighborhood what happens when you push the wrong person too far. The first notice from the Willow Shore Estates HOA arrived on a morning like any other. The lake was calm, sunlight sparkling across Green Lake, and I was sipping my coffee on the porch, watching the ospreys dive for fish. Peaceful, perfect until that envelope with the HOA seal showed up in my mailbox. I could never have guessed how much that letter would change my life. It all began 3 years ago, right after my divorce. 15 years of marriage, and suddenly I was starting over, adrift in a life I barely recognized. When I found this property, a charming 2-story craftsman with cedar siding and a wraparound porch, I felt a piece of myself settle back into place. But it wasn't just the house that drew me in, it was the lake, the view, and the dock that stretched out into Green Lake where my father's sailboat, the Wanderer, now rested. Dad had taught me to sail when I was 10. Patient hands on the tiller, calm voice explaining how to read the wind, the waves, the sky. After he passed away 5 years ago from a heart attack, the Wanderer wasn't just a boat to me, it was the last piece of him I could hold onto. The 30-year-old Pearson sloop wasn't flashy, but I kept her spotless. Polished brass, freshly varnished teak, sails patched with care. She was my tie to simpler days. Willow Shore Estates was meant to be a refugee neighborhood of 75 homes circling the lake, 25 of them with docks like mine. Most folks were friendly. I got along well with my neighbor, Robert Bob Martinez, a retired Air Force officer whose straight-shooting attitude and good humor had earned him the respect of just about everyone. Grace Langley lived on the other side, a sharp-minded real estate lawyer whose energy and smarts made her a natural ally. We shared beers and barbecues at the Marina on weekends, swapped sailing stories, and joked about the HOA's obsession with grass height and mailbox paint. The Marina was the pride of Willow Shore, a neat U-shaped dock with 12 slips, a wide deck with benches, and a pavilion where the community held events. It sat at the end of a narrow path that curved behind the houses from the main road, a detail I'd always thought unremarkable. But that path would soon become the center of a battle none of us had expected. 6 months before everything boiled over, the HOA elected a new president, Allison Grant. I hadn't paid much attention to the election. I worked remotely as a marine systems engineer and kept to myself. The previous president, an easygoing older man named Walter Reed, had been reasonable. But Allison came in like a hurricane, promising property value enhancement and modernization of community standards. Buzzwords, I thought. Until that first letter arrived. Printed on heavy cream paper with the Willow Shore logo embossed at the top, the letter claimed my father's boat was in violation of community aesthetic standards and demanded I remove it within 30 days or face a $100 per day fine. It stunned me. The Wanderer was well maintained, better than some of the eyesores floating on other docks. Where were these standards even written down? I walked down the path to my dock, staring at the old boat like I'd never seen her before. She looked beautiful as ever, blue hull shining, teak trim glowing in the sun. I scanned the shoreline. 3 docks down. A speedboat with peeling paint and a sun-rotted tarp sat neglected. 5 houses the other way, a pontoon boat half-sunk with algae clinging to its sides. Neither had been sighted. The hypocrisy was clear. But why me? Why the Wanderer? I started asking questions. Reached out to my neighbors. Turned out Allison Grant had been selectively enforcing rules that weren't even in the bylaws. And some of those she targeted were homeowners who'd resisted selling their properties to her husband, Ethan Grant, a real estate developer with a reputation for revitalizing communities into gated luxury enclaves. At the next HOA meeting, I confronted them. The room was packed. Bob gave me a nod from across the aisle. Grace slid into the seat beside me, portfolio in hand. Allison sat at the front, sharp as a blade in a white blazer and diamond studs that caught the light each time she gestured. Beside her, Ethan Hayes, her vice president, looked on like a smug king surveying his court. When I asked about the so-called boat standards, Allison's smile thinned. Your vessel, Mr. Carter, is considerably outdated and does not align with the upscale image we are cultivating for Willow Shore's lakefront properties, she said smoothly. Could you point me to the exact rule? I asked, holding up the bylaws. There was no such rule. Ethan cut in. The board reserves the right to make discretionary decisions in the interest of community aesthetics. Bob stood. I've lived here since the first house was built. Never heard of boat aesthetics being a violation. Linda, is there a record of this standard? Linda Foster, the HOA secretary, flipped through her paperwork. No documented amendment or vote on that issue, she said, frowning. The room grew tense. Grace leaned over and whispered, Jim, Ethan approached me last week asking if you might be open to selling your place. Mentioned development plans. There it was. It wasn't about the boat. It was about my land. My dock. My refusal to sell. The meeting ended with Allison pounding the gavel and giving me 30 days to comply. But instead of backing down, I did some digging. In the quiet of my home office, I pulled out my purchase documents, old surveys, county records. And there, in the fine print, was the key. The strip of land connecting the community path to the marina wasn't common ground. It was part of my property, thanks to a decades-old surveying error no one had bothered to correct. I owned the only land access to the marina. I called Grace, and we pored over the records together. This is solid, she said. The HOA's been using that path illegally for years. No easement, no agreement. If you wanted, you could block it off tomorrow. And I just might, I said. The next day, I had the property surveyed again, officially. The results confirmed it. I legally controlled the marina access. The HOA had no right to cross it without my permission. So I made a plan. 2 weeks before Allison's big marina fundraiser, the one she planned to use to launch Ethan's bid for a major development deal, I hired a fencing crew. Quietly. Discreetly. A company from 2 counties over to avoid local gossip. The morning before the fundraiser, at sunrise, the crew arrived. Cedar posts went into the ground like clockwork, stretching across the narrow path that led to the marina. I posted private property, no trespassing signs, and installed a locked gate. I held the only key. By the time Allison screeched into my driveway in her silver BMW, the fence was half up. What do you think you're doing? She shouted. I smiled, calm. Securing my property, Allison. Want to see the survey? She threatened the police. They came, reviewed my documents, and told her politely it was a civil matter. I had every right. Panic spread through the neighborhood as word got out. The fundraiser, set to welcome city officials and potential investors, was now cut off from the marina. By noon, Ethan and several board members showed up, trying to play nice, offering compromises, begging me to hold off. I told them I was open to discussions. On my terms. That evening, with the fundraiser on the line, Allison came to my door flanked by Ethan, Linda, and Representative Charles Monroe, one of the event's VIP guests. Please, she said, tone sweet as syrup, for the good of the children's charity. I agreed to unlock the gata temporarily if the HOA acknowledged my property rights, rescinded the boat citations, and agreed to negotiate a fair easement. With Monroe mediating, they signed. But the damage was done. The next day, a former HOA board member approached me quietly. Told me Allison and Ethan had been plotting to buy out lakefront homes to make way for a luxury resort. And now I had the proof. I dug deeper. Property purchases traced back to an LLC tied to Ethan. Under-market sales, pressure tactics, selective enforcement of violations, a pattern as clear as the summer sky. I gathered the evidence. Bob helped spread the word. Grace prepared the legal arguments. And on the night of the fundraiser, after the guests had left, 50 neighbors gathered on my lawn. One by one, we shared what we'd uncovered. Fines, threats, harassment, stories that matched my own. By the end of that meeting, Allison and Ethan's grip on Willow Shore was broken. The community voted them out on the spot. Bob became interim president. Grace took over as VP. A full audit was launched. Allison and Ethan faced ethics investigations. Their company folded. Their dream of a resort empire drowned beneath the same waters they tried to control. And the Wanderer? She's still moored at my dock, sails white against the blue sky, shining like new. A reminder of my father. A symbol of standing your ground. Because sometimes a boat isn't just a boat. It's a line in the sand. And when the waves crash hardest, it's the one who knows the water best who holds steady at the helm.